Yay. Great. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Wendy Luther with Halifax Partnership, Halifax's public-private economic development organization. We settle for nothing less than a vibrant and successful Halifax. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and a special thank you and hello to our Halifax Partnership Board of Directors, including our board chair, Mr. Ron Lesperance, and our many Halifax Partnership investors joining us today. Thank you, and we could not do our work without you. This is the first of two sessions focused on Halifax's economic recovery from COVID-19. Watch for an invitation to our AGM and next session, Reimagining Halifax's Economy, on September 23rd. Today, we are talking about what COVID-19 has done to our economy and reopening Halifax business spaces. We are recording today's session and will post it on our website for those unable to join us. Now, it is my pleasure to invite His Worship, Mayor Mike Savage, to kick us off. Over to you, Mayor.
Hello, Wendy, good morning. How are you?
I'm so well, good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to everybody who's online. I understand it's a big turnout this morning. I want to thank you for joining us this morning as we work together to reopen Halifax's economy. You know, these have been such unprecedented times that we've become kind of weary of the term unprecedented times. Indeed, if somebody had told me just 6 months ago that a pandemic would sweep the globe, sending many people home for a long period of time, shuttering innumerable businesses, and basically ending travel and tourism, I wouldn't have believed it. Had the same person layered on the series of heartbreaking tragedies that have befallen Nova Scotia, I wouldn't have thought it possible. And then had we learned about the tumult and the anger and the outrage that has led thousands of anti-Black racism protesters to the streets to demand justice, even more remarkable. But tough times have a way of forcing us to dig deep, to reflect meaningfully, and to rise to the occasion. They make us question our values and also to value our questions, like what matters most to us? What can we do better? What are our strengths as a community? Halifax's challenges are by no means behind us. Indeed, COVID continues its race around the globe, including on large parts of our own continent, often impacting those who have the least. Together, we have driven down the incidence in Nova Scotia, but we have lost dozens of people along the way and compromised what had been a robust local economy. And there is no way to sugarcoat it. That said, I'm heartened by what I have witnessed in Nova Scotia's response to COVID and the support that community members and businesses have shown each other. The United Way's Compassion Fund, seeded with a donation from Atlantic Business Interiors and supported by so many other businesses and individuals, has helped scores of organizations cope with the COVID impacts. We've seen chefs from shuttered restaurants turn their skills and their incredible work ethic toward keeping people fed. We've watched people sent home from work quietly take up volunteering. It certainly makes me proud that researchers within the Halifax Innovation District and local entrepreneurs are playing a significant role in the provincial and indeed national response to COVID. The Canadian Centre for Vaccinology at Dal is heading up the first Canadian clinical trials for a potential COVID-19 vaccine. Companies have moved from fashion to face mask manufacture, from fabrication to face shields. And in this city, we know how to adjust to a changing tide. Consider as well, as I found out, that the IBM Center in Halifax is the highest performing client innovation center in North America. And they tell us they are on track in Q2 2020 to be the highest performing center in the world. They credit that success to the exceptional young talent they found in Halifax. Now, regular followers of the Halifax Partnership will recognize Axis, a specialty insurance and global reinsurance company who chose Halifax as the home of their new business technology center in 2019. Despite this pandemic, Axis continued its energetic hiring strategy and recently hosted a high-tech virtual job fair that drew more than 500 participants. Since choosing Halifax, they've been able to swiftly access the qualified individuals that they need through thriving post-secondary and a collaborative network of partners like the partnership. Wattpad, the global multi-platform entertainment company, followed through on its December announcement to launch a Halifax-based second headquarters, and they continue to hire as well. I remember the day that I asked Wendy and her team if they would take on the Halifax COVID Recovery Challenge. She was already on it, and I knew that she would be on it. With her awesome staff, dedicated group of investors, and this city, they knew that they would play to its strengths through tough times. We went into this crisis with strong performance indicators, as Ian will most likely tell us, including record population growth, a boom in construction, year-over-year gains in tourism, and big ambitions for our port and airport. We had attracted and kept more young people than at any time in our history, and we were seeing new companies pop up like dandelions. This has been a bruising time, and it's not over, but Halifax will demonstrate its resilience. We will again welcome newcomers and tourists from around the world. We will be a center for research and innovation. We will continue to be a center of shipbuilding excellence. We will regain the successes of our port and our international airport, and we will continue to support startups and entrepreneurs. I hope that we do, and will also carry with us a few lessons from these difficult days and months. But the work goes on, reopening our economy, and not forgetting the other crisis that we face, the climate change crisis. This afternoon, Council will debate Halifax 2050, an ambitious plan designed to achieve net zero carbon emissions in this community by 2050. I think we've learned how much we value each other. Maybe not at the office Monday to Friday, but certainly with our colleagues, our favorite coffee shops, lunch spots, and places to grab a beverage with friends. We miss taking in a game like The Wanderers or a play at a theater. We miss bumping into friends at the farmer's market or meeting folks from away who are discovering the city for the first time. So let's commit to working as hard as we can to safely return to the life that we love. And while we're at it, let's also commit to ensuring more people from more diverse communities and backgrounds have greater opportunities to be a welcome and vital part of our success. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to hearing the speakers and being part of the work ahead. Thank you very much, Wendy and your team.
Thank you so much, Mayor Savage, for those words and for joining us this morning and all of your work every day to support the growth of Halifax. As COVID hit our city, we all responded to stay safe and minimize the spread of the virus. The economic impacts have been severe, and the Halifax Partnership and Halifax Regional Municipality have been working with partners across the city to develop and implement Halifax's economic response and recovery plan. The fastest path to economic recovery is to effectively manage the spread of the virus. Collaboration is key, and it will take us further and faster together. As a result of our collective actions and helped by our geography, we are in a privileged position compared with most cities around the world. And as of yesterday, Nova Scotia is reporting 0 active cases in our province. COVID-19 has affected every person and business on the planet, but we are all affected differently. Some businesses have never been busier, but for businesses closed under the order and hundreds, if not thousands more, closed because of lack of demand, with borders closed, flights canceled, and customers and clients feeling skittish about making investments during this uncertain time. It is an understatement that this has been a difficult time for most businesses and organizations. I was thrilled to hear the news when restaurants were given the green light to reopen, as I imagine many of you were as well. But appreciate that running a restaurant at a maximum of 50% capacity remains incredibly challenging without the usually bustling downtown lunch crowd. As such, it is vital to many downtown businesses that the 22,000 downtown workers return to their physical office spaces while following public health guidelines, of course. The Halifax Partnership team is transitioning back into our offices this month, as are many of our investors and partners. Key drivers of our collective economic recovery, in addition to returning to our physical office spaces, will be the opening of our borders for free movement of people and business within an Atlantic bubble, and clear timing of reopening milestones when possible for Halifax businesses to plan for their future over the short term, as the longer term trajectory of this illness is unknown. Our conversation today will feed directly into the development of Halifax's Economic Response and Recovery Plan, a copy of which can be found on our Halifax Partnership website at halifaxpartnership.com. Halifax Partnership specific actions already underway include a suite of initiatives to support business during this time. A government supports navigation tool, the Virtual Advisors Program, a retooled connector program supported by the province of Nova Scotia and RBC to connect students, recent graduates, and newcomers to Halifax to job opportunities and job search training to help them navigate this challenging time. We're gearing up for more announcements of programming under the umbrella of Halifax's Economic Response and Recovery Plan, and we look forward to sharing those with you shortly. You can find the latest details on the plan and supports for business on our website, and I invite you to tune in to Halifax Regional Council on July 7th, when HRM CAO Jacques Dubé and I will provide an update on our progress. During today's session, we will cover Halifax's latest economic data and consumer research, and we will hear from business leaders sharing their experiences and insights. It's time to enjoy Halifax again, safely. We invited our partners, Develop Nova Scotia and Discover Halifax, to share upcoming events and campaigns that invite us to get out and explore our city from end to end. Thank you to those who provided questions in advance, and we look forward to receiving more in the chat. We will be following up on today's session with a written Q&A to ensure all questions get answered. To help keep our meeting on track, we're using a timer to let our speakers know they're nearing the end of their segment. They'll get a 1-minute warning that sounds like this. Thank you, Anne. And finally, we'd like to know a bit more about you, our audience. And so we're running a couple of polling questions today, and I'm going to invite my colleagues, if the technology cooperates, to share the first one. Here we have it. How is your business operating today? And I will give you a moment to respond, and then we'll share the results. So as we wait for the results to come out, there we go. Well, this is certainly a transition from a similar poll conducted several weeks ago as we moved to our physical office spaces. It certainly for us was easier to leave our physical office space than it is to return. But thank you so much to all of you who are making that effort. It means a lot to the businesses in our downtown and beyond. No one knows Halifax better than the Halifax Partnership, and this is especially true of Ian Monroe, Halifax Partnership's chief economist, and our research team. It is now my pleasure to pass the floor to Ian to walk us through the 2020 Halifax Index COVID-19 edition. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy, and good morning, everyone. I'm hoping you can all see and hear me now, and our technology is working for us. I will just share my screen to begin the presentation. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble advancing my slide here for some reason.
Put your cursor right on the slide and you can work it from there.
Thank you, Allison. That's why I'm an economist and not an IT professional. Before I launch into the presentation, I want to say a few thank yous to our gold sponsor, Saltwire Network, and our silver sponsor, Halifax Regional Municipality. To the Halifax Partnership project team who's worked so hard under trying circumstances to produce this year's index. Paul Jacob, Anna Ketty, Chadwick Myers, Kaylin Peters, Brittany Warren, and Ann Yu. To our research partners, MQO Research and Narrative Research, whose results we'll be discussing shortly. To National Public Relations for their role in building our new index website. And to all of you out there who've been kind enough to join us today. The Halifax Index is different this year. First, we've gone all digital and are no longer producing a printed copy. Second, like everything else, the COVID-19 crisis has required us to make some changes to the index. For 2020, we have stripped the index down to topics that are both relevant and in context, given our current situation. Topics not specifically addressed in this year's index will be covered in other ways, including the Halifax Partnership's economic dashboard, the quarterly snapshot reports, and of course, next year's index. As well, for certain topics that had been intended as expansions for this year, such as more data on the role of the military in Halifax's economy, we will be issuing some additional research pieces in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for those. The index is an annual report, and the main objective typically is to provide an update on Halifax's progress last year, 2019 in this case. I will do that, but also will try today to add some context to these results, given the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. As the 2019 year-end data rolled in back in January and February, I was really looking forward to this year's index presentation because I was going to have a lot of good news to share. Then came the COVID-19 crisis and everything changed everywhere. The fact remains that 2019 was a stellar year for the Halifax economy. It also is a fact that the economic fallout of the pandemic has hit many people and many businesses in our city very, very hard. And some of the wounds will take time to heal. We can be thankful that our momentum leading into the pandemic and the way that we all in Nova Scotia have managed our way through it these past 3 months will serve us well as we rebound back to a trend of growth. This is the first of the 3 components of our growth plan report card. And I just ask you to recall that the right-hand status column compares the most recent data to the baseline year, not to the prior year. The 2.6% growth in the headline GDP number is the best we've seen in many years. You also can see that most other items here are trending the right way. And I draw your attention to the nice jump in the share of surveyed businesses that consider Halifax an above average place to do business. The share of employment that is full-time did drop slightly, and the commercial vacancy rate remains above our baseline figure. But note that it has now improved for 2 years in a row. Now let's look more closely at a few of these items. This chart compares Halifax's GDP to 5 benchmark cities. These cities are broadly in the same size range as Halifax, and 4 of the 5 share the status of provincial capital. The columns show the absolute size of each city's GDP in 2019. The percentage figures are the GDP growth rates from 2018 to 2019. 2020 will be different. The Conference Board of Canada is projecting that Halifax's GDP will shrink by 3.4% this year, an unprecedented drop. In 2021, however, a strong rebound is forecasted. Each spring, our friends at Narrative Research conduct a survey for us of Halifax businesses. Several of the questions are combined into a business confidence index, which you can see reported in the second column from the left labeled BCI. Excuse me. This year, the surveys were conducted in March, with 88% of responses captured before the March 13th to 15th weekend, when our lives abruptly changed. So these results, record highs for the Business Confidence Index, and the share of respondents calling Halifax an above average place to do business, approximate a snapshot of business sentiment just before things went downhill. We are lucky to have Margaret Brigley, the CEO of Narrative Research, coming up as our next speaker. She'll provide more insights on consumer sentiments and the impacts of COVID-19. Some of the key drivers of our success in 2019 are also taking the worst beatings in the current crisis. With a 3% figure for 2019, Halifax led the benchmark cities in retail sales growth, but we know that layoffs and losses in the retail sector have been particularly acute. As with GDP overall, we'll see a sharp dip in 2020 and then a bounce back in 2021. Programs like our Economic Recovery and Response Plan and related work by our many partners will be key to restoring consumer comfort and confidence and ensuring that we do indeed get this bounce. Tourism follows the same pattern of fantastic growth in 2019, but collapse in 2020. Many of us have our fingers crossed that perhaps quite soon there will be a maritime or Atlantic bubble that will allow for tourism flows among these provinces. Visitors from New Brunswick and PEI comprise almost 60% of the tourists who come to Nova Scotia each year. So this reopening step could be a very important event for our tourism operators. As to when we again will see meaningful tourist numbers from the rest of Canada, the US and abroad, there are too many unknowns at this time to make any predictions. Fortunately, we have great people like Ross Jefferson and the Discover Halifax team working to get the sector back on its feet as fast as possible. Halifax has experienced elevated office vacancy rates for several years now. This is a function of large additions to the stock of office space in the city and the growing trend for tenants to downsize in terms of their square feet per employee. We have, though, seen a gradual decline in the downtown vacancy rate since it spiked in the second quarter of 2018. A bright side of this period of high vacancy rates is that increases in average rent levels have been modest. Affordable office space remains a strong selling point for Halifax. COVID-19 may put the brakes on the recent downward movements in the vacancy rate until business activity resumes a more normal pace. Even then, the current mass experiment in remote working may have unknown longer-term consequences. Who knows a year from now what share of office workers will spend significant amounts of time working from home? Luckily, we also have with us today Dale Noseworthy, Chief Financial Officer at Killam REIT, to share her expertise in such real estate questions. Here's the second page of our 2019 report card, and once again, we see a lot of A's. Since its launch in 2016, our current economic growth plan has tied economic growth closely to growth in population and the labor force. These, in turn, are driven by youth retention, international student attraction, and immigration. On all these fronts, Halifax had great numbers in 2019, including record highs for international students and immigration. Last year, I reported on the first increase in Halifax's labor force participation rate. That's the share of the adult population that is either working or looking for work in almost a decade. I am pleased to report that in 2019, the rate increased again, with more than 45% of labor force growth occurring among youth ages 15 to 24. Also in 2019, the unemployment rate hit its lowest level since 2008, as we added 6,500 jobs, following growth of 9,600 in 2018. But of course, we are at a different place now, with massive job losses occurring through the spring of 2020. Our unemployment rate is now close to 11%, but this statistic fails to tell the full story, as many people affected by the crisis do not meet the technical criteria to be counted as unemployed. Some are not actively seeking work as they await their shuttered workplaces to reopen, and others may officially be working, but only for a few hours per week. Statistics Canada's broader measure, called the underutilization rate, incorporates these scenarios, and the most recent value for Halifax was close to 35%, or more than 3 times the official unemployment rate. This chart shows Halifax's industrial employment structure in 2019. 2 of our top 3 sectors, as measured by employment, wholesale and retail trade and accommodation and food services, are among those that have suffered the biggest COVID-related downturns as shops, restaurants, bars, and hotels have been closed. Employment in the hardest hit sectors tend to be skewed towards female and younger workers at the lower end of the pay scale. Given the recent heightened attention on inequities and injustices experienced by Black and Indigenous Canadians, a natural question is whether these groups have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 crisis. I'm afraid the answer is that we have no information from a health perspective or an economic one. It remains the case that the most recent facsimile we have for a labor data point for the African Nova Scotian community comes from the 2016 census, and we don't expect to have another one until sometime in 2022 at the earliest. And here's the third part of our report card, perhaps the best and the most surprising of the three segments. Given recent trends, another year of record population growth actually was not a surprise. I'll dig a bit deeper into the population numbers in a moment. Most of the other items in this page come from our City Matters survey, carried out by MQO Research. In contrast to the business confidence survey that was largely complete before COVID-19 was really affecting us here in Halifax, the City Matters data were collected between March 18th and 26th, after the lockdown was in place. Of the 8 City Matters questions reported here, 7 show improvement from 2018 to 19, and 6 of 8 are at all-time highs, including the measure on overall quality of life. Housing affordability sticks out for the fact that it has steadily declined from the baseline year and consistently has been the lowest rated of all items. Before receiving the data, I might have guessed that anxiety and stress from the pandemic would dent people's quality of life perceptions, but in fact, the movement was in the other direction. My advice to pollsters and their clients: if you want good numbers, try to ensure that your survey population is wearing pajamas. As I mentioned earlier, a core component of the economic growth plan launched in 2016 was to grow Halifax's population. In this chart, you can see clearly the difference in the pre and post 2016 periods. The key questions now are: how will the COVID-19 pandemic affect our population growth trajectory? And what knock-on effects will there be for things like retail sales, housing and rental markets, and post-secondary enrollment? Our population growth has been immigration-led, and since 2016, the leading sources of new permanent residents in Halifax have been India, China, the Philippines, Nigeria, and, due to the one-time spike of refugees in 2016, Syria. Just the top 2 of these countries, India and China, account for 36% of the total inflow. India is experiencing a sharp increase in COVID-19 cases, and Canada's relationship with China is now extremely rocky. Beyond these specific examples, people from anywhere in the world who may otherwise have been inclined to come to Canada may be deterred by health-related travel restrictions, hesitancy to travel, or economic factors. It also could be the case, however, that Canada's opportunity, stability, and relatively good outcome in terms of containing COVID-19 will make more people than ever want to come here. Here you can see just how important international migration has been to our overall population growth. That's the green section. The yellow is people coming from other provinces, while the red is people coming into Halifax from other parts of Nova Scotia. The blue is natural growth, equal to births minus deaths. It also is important to recognize that a significant share of that international component is the annual cohort of international students who come to our universities and colleges. 2019 was another record year with just under 7,000 international students in Halifax. At the provincial level, 56% of international students came here from just 2 countries, India and China. As with immigration more broadly, this concentration in source countries could impede the return of these flows to pre-pandemic levels. It also is possible, though, that given both pandemic responses and other matters, Canada may take on an additional shine compared to other typical destinations for international students like the United States and the United Kingdom. Okay, let's turn back to quality of life factors for a moment. 2019 brought Halifax's vacancy rate for 2-bedroom apartments down below 1%. Consistent with such a tight market, the average rent rose as well. Some degree of longer-term relief may be on the horizon, as recent figures for new multi-residential construction have been very strong. The more immediate question again hinges on population movements. What effect will stalled in-migration and empty post-secondary classrooms, at least for a term or two, have on the rental market? In turn, how will that affect decisions about future investments in residential construction? I again look forward to Dale Noseworthy's insights on these questions, as well as those of Corey Bell, President and CEO of Lindsay Construction. They will be participating in our panel discussion coming up in a few minutes. The last data point I'll talk about this morning is debt. Given the state of our economy, we can expect debt levels, debt delinquencies, and insolvencies to rise in the coming months, both for consumers and businesses. In addition, our provincial and federal governments have funded huge income and liquidity support programs in response to the crisis. These will be debt financed and represent additional liabilities for future taxpayers. This chart shows the share of non-mortgage debts for which payments are late or delinquent in more technical language. As you can see, Halifax consumers have a higher delinquency rate than the Canadian average. Our upcoming panel discussion also will include Craig Thompson, Scotiabank's Senior Vice President, Retail and Small Business for the Atlantic region. I'm sure Craig will have some very interesting observations regarding COVID-19 impacts on finances and debt. So how do we get back to normal, to growth, and to the future Halifax we all were imagining pre-crisis? How do we get students back in schools, employees back in workplaces, customers back in stores, tourists back in hotels and restaurants, and newcomers back to knocking on our front door? In just a moment, we'll have our panel of industry leaders provide their thoughts on these questions. In the coming weeks and months, we'll continue to monitor the economic impacts of COVID-19 and our recovery from it via our economic dashboard and quarterly snapshot reports. Labor market, bankruptcy, and retail sales will be important stats to watch. News on the resumption of immigrant and international student inflows also will be critical. Halifax entered 2020 with a lot of momentum, and that will propel us into recovery as reopening expands. We can be confident of a return to great things, although we have some challenges to overcome. At the same time, we should remember that pre-COVID challenges related to affordability, inequality, and the environment still remain to be addressed as well. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your time. I now will turn things over to Margaret Brigley, President and CEO of Narrative Research. She also is a member of the Halifax Partnership Board of Directors and chairs its Governance Committee. Margaret will let us know what Halifax residents and consumers are thinking and feeling about the impacts of COVID-19 and the path back to normal. Margaret, take it away, please.
Thank you so much, Ian. And good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here. Ian shared with you a number of economic indicators, including key measures of business confidence. And to set the stage for today's discussion on reopening Halifax's economy, I'd like to share with you some information relating to consumer sentiment and how the public has impacted to COVID-19. Now, I'm going to begin by starting with consumer confidence. More than 2 decades ago, we created the Consumer Confidence Index in Atlantic Canada, and we've been tracking it every quarter for more than 25 years. Our most recent Atlantic quarterly that was collected in May showed a dramatic decline in consumer confidence, with consumer confidence levels for the region reaching record low. Now, initially set at 100, this index is a composite score of 5 questions. And those questions include things like perceptions of the current state of the economy, the provincial economy, the anticipated state of the provincial economy within the next 12 months, current household well-being, future household well-being, and also conditions for making a major purchase like a major appliance or a vehicle. And as you can see, this index has proven to be sensitive to national, regional, and international events, and very much reflective of our real world reality. So currently, across Atlantic Canada, the consumer confidence sits at 77.7. Now, in Nova Scotia, consumer confidence currently sits at 78.7, and that varies across the province, as has typically been the case. In Halifax, consumer confidence is higher than the rest of the province, but you can see in this graph that the trend is certainly very consistent. We've seen a significant decline in consumer confidence in the last quarter, and it's now at 80.4. Important to note here that consumer confidence in Nova Scotia is not a record low. as it is for the region overall. We shared similarly low levels of consumer confidence during the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. And as you can see, that low point was short-lived, with confidence rebounding relatively quickly. So hopefully that will be the case in this situation as well. I also just want to mention quickly that there is some variance across the region. Consumer confidence has declined, though, for all provinces. You can see here the trend is the same. And Newfoundland and Labrador continues to hold the lowest level of consumer confidence in the region. Now, in April, as we were finishing the 5th week in a state of emergency, we surveyed 3,200 Atlantic Canadians, including just over 1,500 Nova Scotia residents. And there we learned that virtually all Nova Scotians, 99%, believe that COVID-19 presents a serious economic threat to our province and to residents personally. More so, we saw that most consider the pandemic to pose a serious threat to their personal financial situation. In fact, regardless of whether someone lives in Halifax or in the rest of Nova Scotia, 6 in 10 consider COVID-19 to pose a serious threat to their personal finances. And another important point here is, since COVID-19, 3 in 10 Nova Scotians, or 28%, and that figure was identical for within HRM as well, 28% have had someone in their household apply for financial assistance programs. That could be EI, that could be, or a CERB, some kind of funding program. Now, there's no question that the pandemic has negatively impacted the employment situation in our province. 4 in 10 Nova Scotians and 1/3 of Halifax residents who were employed prior to the pandemic have had their employment negatively impacted by the crisis, whether it be through income reduction, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. Sorry. Well, most see in this slide, you'll see that most have seen that the pandemic is having a greater direct impact on the province economically than themselves personally. And what our research has shown is that the pandemic poses serious consequences to Nova Scotians' personal financial situation. We're most likely to have seen a negative financial impact on our retirement savings or investments. And here in Halifax, you can see that 1/3 have experienced a decrease in income, while 1/4 have seen their ability to assist other family members financially impacted. 15% have been negatively impacted in their ability to meet their financial obligations or pay their bills on time. And you can see that 1 in 10 told us that the pandemic has negatively impacted their ability to pay their mortgage or their rent. And those who are most impacted in their ability to pay bills or pay their mortgage or their rent, they include younger residents and those who are more vulnerable, those in lower income households. Now I'll go to the one that I gave you a preview on. As I mentioned, there's no question that the pandemic has negatively impacted employment in our region and in our city. 4 in 10 Nova Scotians and 1/3 of Halifax residents were employed prior to the pandemic, who were employed rather, they've had their employment negatively impacted by the crisis, whether it be through income reduction, temporary layoff, or a permanent job loss. 6 in 10 Halifax residents have not experienced a negative impact on employment, and that's likely reflective of the fact that we've got a sizable public sector here in our urban center. Now, how Canadians will socialize and entertain themselves in the coming weeks and months will clearly be impacted by the pandemic. Without a sustained period of no new COVID-19 cases in the province or a vaccine being available, Canadians are not willing to engage in several activities. Given the impact COVID-19 has had on routine in-person activities, we asked Canadians their likelihood of undertaking different activities in the coming weeks or months once certain services are possible. And importantly, when you see these categories listed on the screen, this does not include those individuals who an activity was not applicable for, or it wasn't something that they normally do. So there is a fair bit of information on this screen, but in summary, the orange indicates areas where consumers are unlikely to undertake an activity once it's possible to do so. And you can see the box on the right-hand side, that shows the mean or the average scores on a 1 to 10 scale, where 1 is unlikely and a 10 is extremely likely. So in essence, what we see here is that there's notable reluctance, if we start at the bottom, for instance, to visit a casino. 70% have indicated that they are unlikely to do that, or a spa, or a pub, or to go to the gym. And you can see here 54% have said that they're unlikely to do that. And opinions are more mixed when considering going to a restaurant, but still on average, 5.2 is the mean there. So clearly shows that there is some reluctancy in undertaking activities as these services become available. Similarly, you can see that there is a clear reluctance to send a child to daycare. Again, down at the bottom, 65% of those, again, who would have that this situation would be applicable to them, indicate that they're comfortable in doing so or likely to do so. 62% have indicated that they're unlikely to take a flight, or 6 in 10 to take a cab. People are most comfortable returning to work. So you can see 51% have said that they definitely will, in essence. People also seem to be more comfortable in going to the dentist. Now, we asked those who said they were unlikely, so basically those who indicated that orange response, we asked them what would it take for them to undertake those activities or to be more likely to do so. And for most activities, what we've seen is that having a sustained period of no new cases in the province is key. For taking a flight, there's a bit of a different response here, and you can see that 4 in 10 are waiting for a vaccine to be available. So there is clearly fear and hesitancy in that regard. Now, while some businesses certainly have been critical of the pace of businesses and services opening, that sentiment isn't as prevalent among consumers. At the very end of May, we see that across the country, provinces were beginning to reopen businesses and services at different paces. And we surveyed 1,200 Canadians and asked them to describe the speed of reopening their province. We saw that consumers were generally supportive of their province's pace of opening up, and about 6 in 10 believe the speed of reopening businesses is just about right, while 1/3 say that the society is opening too fast, and fewer than 10 believe they're opening too slowly. So results are pretty consistent across the country. As businesses and services begin to reopen, we also ask their likelihood of undertaking a series of social distancing measures. And as you can see here, Canadians will continue to prioritize safety when outside of their home, and we're less likely to wear gloves in public or wear a mask in public. We also asked about installing an app on phone if requested. Contact tracing is something that Canadian residents are very divided about, and results here show that we're fairly divided when it comes to installing an app that would allow their location to be tracked. About 1/2 indicate some likelihood, while over 3 in 10 oppose the concept and 18% were on the fence. And again, results are consistent here across the country. So to finish up, while we are likely tiring of hearing the phrase new normal, what will our new normal be, our latest regional survey shows that changes are anticipated in how we permanently do things. We asked more than 1,500 Nova Scotians how they think the pandemic will ultimately affect the way we do things. And looking forward, Nova Scotians and Haligonians are consistent in anticipating life after COVID-19 to be different from how they were prior to the pandemic. At least 2/3 believe there will be some permanent changes in how we do things, while 1/4 anticipate life after the pandemic will be fundamentally changed. Only 1 in 10 or less think things will go back to normal. So knowing that there is broad agreement that the pandemic will have lasting impact on how society works in the future, I'll turn our discussion back to you, Wendy, so we can discuss economic recovery now.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and Ian, for sharing those insights with us, especially the consumer confidence insights. And as so many of us are working hard to get our businesses open while following health protocols, what can we collectively do to make our Nova Scotia and Halifax residents feel more comfortable to get out into those spaces? We look forward to hearing what you think. The 266 people on this call with us today, we're going to launch a poll here to capture your willingness and your current behavior under these our current reopening. And Margaret, I really look forward to having a further conversation with you on slicing and dicing that data for Halifax residents and Nova Scotians, seeing as that we certainly are in a preferential position right now as it comes to the containment of the COVID-19 virus. Here is the poll. So I'll give you a few moments to respond. Well, as we wait for those results to be shared, which I'm sure will be any minute, I'll ask our panelists. Oh, here we go. Here are the answers. So most of us are right in the middle with 13%, as you can see on your screen, back out there taking in every opportunity available to you, maybe more than you did pre-COVID. Most of us are in the middle. We're getting back a little cautiously, and 29% still taking it slowly, only shopping for essentials. And we'll hear from our friends at Develop Nova Scotia, Discover Halifax at the end about how safely we can move more of us into category 1 and 2. So now we're moving on to the next portion of our program for you today. And it is my pleasure to introduce Corey Bell, President and CEO of Lindsay Construction, Halifax Partnership Board member and chair of our Ad Hoc Development Committee. The Ad Hoc Development Committee is the primary advisory board for the development of Halifax's Economic Response and Recovery Plan. And Corey is also an IWK Foundation board member. So Corey, thank you for joining us this morning and for leading our conversation with our panelists. Take it away to kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. And thank you, Margaret and Ian, for the information you provided. In particular, enjoyed the first part of Ian's where things were much, much more positive and sets the goalpost of where we're going to head and strive to be as we come out of this. I'm joined here today with Dale Noseworthy, CFO, Killam Apartment REIT. Killam is one of Canada's largest residential landlords. They own, operate, and develop over $3.4 billion in their portfolio. And Killam has selected to have Halifax as their head of office. We're proud to have Killam part of the Halifax economy. And then Craig Thompson, Senior Vice President, Retail and Small Business for Scotiabank in the Atlantic region. So welcome both of you, and we'll get into the questions here shortly. I was asked to share a little bit about Lindsay's and our experience with COVID to kick off the conversation. So like everybody, we responded quickly to the reduction of density in our offices. We listened to the government and their restrictions around health protocols. We had the majority of our staff moved to work remotely from home, although we did stay open. We ended up with about a 70-30 split, 70 working at home, 30% staying in the office. We provided a safe place to work for everyone. There you could recognize the social distance requirements, stopped face-to-face meetings, and a lot of people enjoyed coming into the office because it felt like a safer place to be. And we also vocalized our support to flatten the curve. We're all in and believed the importance of acting swiftly and decisively to flatten the curve, which Nova Scotia has done well. On our sites is a little more unique. You know, we have over 100 active sites at any time, each one of them different at different areas, and really tackling, like everyone, confusion. You know, what can you do? What can't you do? We learned very quick there wasn't a playbook, nor was one going to be given to us. We had to come up with our own protocols around the restrictions that were in place, submit them, and ensure that we're acting safely. It worked reasonably well on the majority of our sites, but there's always going to be a little bit of apprehension with some of the workers, and we certainly gave everybody the leeway they needed, the right to refuse or right to ask questions, and we were there with them. And you know, we're going to see some long-term benefits from that. You know, higher standards in hygiene, which is overdue on construction sites, is going to be the norm. You're going to see more ways to ensure that folks are staying, washing their hands, and such, and that'll help us in the long term as we come out of this. We learned how to use technology a little better. Technology we always had, but we never really dug into it. In particular, some of our senior site individuals who might have been a little bit apprehensive of technology at the beginning and embraced it full-heartedly. We are now fully operational. We have about 80% of our staff are in, with others still working from home, dealing with home childcare situations or their own personal health. The federal funding is helping. We have qualified for some because we're not as efficient as we once were. It's impossible for us to be efficient. You just can't get the density on the job site, so you can't perform at the same level as you once have. So we're overemployed and plan to stay overemployed for the next little while as we help our staff get through this time on a personal level. But what we need to see is a plan. We need dates. We need clarity. We need transparency. You know, for SMEs, not-for-profits and such to continue to operate, they need some goalposts to work towards. We're, you know, part of what makes Halifax, Nova Scotia so great is our entrepreneurial spirit and our business folks that dig in and they put everything on the line. And you know, the governments need to help us, and they need to let us know how do they plan to come out of the wage subsidies. How do they plan to open up the provinces, at least with some potential dates to allow us to do that. We need business continuity, and we can only plan for it that way. So that's us in a nutshell. I'm going to pass over, I'm going to ask a question here. I'm going to start with you, Dale, and I'm going to ask the same question to both of you, but talk a little bit about your business. Are you fully open, back to work protocols? How did you go through COVID-19?
Sure. Okay, so as you know, housing provider, Killam Apartments and manufactured home communities are home to about 20,000 families. So we were, of course, open throughout the whole pandemic, and we quickly integrated new processes to make sure our tenants and our employees were safe, increasing the frequency and diligent cleaning of high touch areas and closing common areas, and working. Our staff really stepped up. We had about 350 of our staff who were on the ground all the way through, especially the intensity of the late March and early April with a lot of uncertainty, that really did a fantastic job keeping our buildings clean and safe for all. So it was a very intense time there for a while. Today now we've started to open back up those common areas. It has been done kind of region by region, depending what those new regulations are. So we do want to make sure that our tenants stay safe. So we are doing so cautiously, but gyms are reopening, but with new standards in terms of the amount of people, of course, all the adhering to all our social distancing requirements. At head office, we did quickly move to working from home. We started to have people come back in a more focused area at the beginning of June. So for the month of June, we've had about 35% working in the office. Some are here full time, some are just here a few days a week, and we're really managing to that 35%. We're moving up to 50% in July, 70% in August, and then targeting September to have everyone back. Being flexible to those who may be experiencing requirements to still work from home. But overall, as many people have indicated through this, people have been very efficient through home, but we would still want to have people back in the office if we can. So we're doing that with our regional offices as well. So far, I have to say, coming back to work has been good. This is week 4 for me back in the office, and it's nice to be back. Everyone's following the new protocols, and it's starting to feel, comfortable. So it's been positive.
That's good. Yeah, the new protocols are becoming habit. You just fall into it after being back in the office, and you just do it in second nature.
Yes.
Craig, I'm going to ask you the same question about you. You have a broader reach when you're looking at your branches plus your downtown offices and folks, and you know that there's been a big sentiment about how to start getting people back downtown to support our local business.
Yeah, Corey, I mean, we have 130 branches across the 4 provinces, 17 in Halifax. And early on in the pandemic, we made the decision to keep our branches open with the hopes that it was going to disperse traffic and keep our staff safe. And I have to say it's worked well. It certainly has had the added benefit of, being available for our customers when they've needed us the most during the pandemic, and people have had a lot of issues and concerns about what's going on with their, their finances, and they need access to banking. So it's worked very well. We have a large customer contact center at Scotia Square, over 500 people working there. Social distancing in that case wasn't as possible in some cases, so we do have some people from that contact center working from home, and then when it's safe, we'll bring them back. And then, at 1709 Hollis, which is our historic head office, most people, other than the main branch, have been working from home. The plan is to have them start to return back to work in the next couple of months as they feel safe to do so. That includes myself. I'm normally working 2 or 3 days a week from the office downtown. And much like Dale mentioned, we implemented a number of procedures and policies in place to safeguard staff. We moved at lightning speed in terms of plexiglass barriers and hand sanitizer to protect both customers and staff. But we've also supplemented benefits programs. We've provided some significant additional personal obligation days, free access to healthcare apps. We provided compensation during kind of the peak period of the pandemic to help defray additional costs that our employees may be incurring for things like childcare and transit, perhaps. So we've done a lot, but again, we may have had 1 or 2 branches closed for a short period of time based on staffing challenges, but I'm really pleased that, all branches are currently open. We are operating on reduced hours, 9:30 to 3 in most markets. We've chosen not to reopen on Saturdays for the time being, just because we are very mindful of the impact this has taken on staff in terms of their personal lives and their resiliency. So we're concerned about that. So we'll revisit those hours at some point later on. But right now, when we look at our customer satisfaction scores, they've never been higher. So those reduced hours seem to be working well. And I think our customers and staff feel like we've taken the right steps to protect them.
Okay. Craig, just a quick follow-up on that. I know a lot of the banks and large accounting firms and such are taking direction nationally or internationally, even depending on where their head offices are. COVID-19 is different in Atlantic Canada compared to areas like Toronto, Montreal, and just the situation as it comes to how folks get to work through mass transit, the amount of people requiring the high-speed elevators and everything else. Is there a sentiment that there could be a different protocol for the Atlantic Canadian group of banks versus taking national direction, which would be coming out of a Toronto type atmosphere?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can only speak on behalf of Scotiabank, but if you think about downtown Toronto and the towers, we've actually been asked this, the other employers in that sector have been asked by Mayor Tory to stay closed and keep our employees working at home until at least September. It may go beyond that, but this is one of those situations where even though we're national, we've been allowed to have some regional input in terms of what we do. So for instance, hours of business, again, that's really, my call based on feedback from our teams or from our customers of what we might do. So it's very much of a different situation here. And I think it's, we've earned the flexibility because of the way we've been able to flatten the curve.
Good. Hey, Dale, we heard Ian talk a little bit about vacancy rates, the rental market. It was very strong, Halifax, before COVID hit in March. How does the rental market look today? Are we going to continue with low vacancy rates? And, how, knowing that you look across country, how do we compare to other places in your portfolio?
Yeah, so as Ian indicated, last year, 2019 was the strongest rental market we've ever seen in Halifax. He'd highlighted CMHC stats at 1% vacancy, record low, average rent increases of 3.8%. So very strong rental market. And certainly things did take a pause in March. For January, February, we were actually trending a little bit above where we were last year that same time. So things did pause in March. What we saw was a reduction in turnover. We turn over about 30% of our units every year. It's just things happen, people leave. We definitely saw a very big reduction in turnover in April and May, but we've actually started to see that come back as people get more comfortable with the new norm. So we've seen turnover come back up. We also saw a decrease in the amount of leasing interest during the onset of the pandemic. Not surprising, it's not a key time to be relocating. But we were still seeing interest, and our leasing teams were able to quickly change their processes to do virtual showings. And so, but definitely reduced activity. However, looking now at May and June, June especially, we've seen those leasing interests come back, and our occupancy levels are comparable to where they were last year. So, and even looking out, September is always the busiest time in Halifax, and we're watching that carefully. And right now we are on track with where we were last year. So the rental market is proving very resilient. And when we look at unit turns, so when we have a new tenant coming in is when we're able to get a little bit more on the rent lift. We have had our rents frozen since the pandemic for those tenants that are staying. We have not been putting increases through, but on new people that are coming, we bring them to market, and we're still seeing the same kind of increases we saw pre-COVID. So that is surprising when you look at everything that's happened, but I think it speaks to the demand for rental is still strong. So I think that for 2020, we're going to still see those strong occupancy numbers. Now, longer term, the economic challenges that we're all going to face from this, and a decrease in immigration and all those factors longer term, we may likely see some increased vacancy there. But so far it's looking strong. And compared to the rest of the country, Halifax is, of our 12 markets, in the top quarter for sure.
That's good. Good to hear. Craig, for you come across a lot of commercial, retail, businesses and individuals. A lot have been hard hit by COVID, some more than others. What are you seeing from your direct contact with your customers, and compare Halifax to other markets in Atlantic Canada, and maybe touch a little bit on the programs, the government support programs that clients are using during the pandemic? Okay,
well, there's a lot to unpack in that question.
Yeah, as you can do it in about 3 to 4 minutes.
3 to 4 minutes. So I could answer it with one question. Say it's complicated, but it is complicated. And so, what we're hearing from our customers is that health and safety of employees and customers remains priority number one for them, as I think it should. I mean, I worry a little bit about people thinking we're past this when, if you look at other jurisdictions, recently New Brunswick, I mean, they can flare up pretty quickly. And if that happens, then businesses will close again. The impact on the business customers really varies. I mean, in some cases, we've had businesses that have hardly been impacted or actually have benefited from the pandemic, and others that have been, absolutely decimated in terms of closure. If you look at the retail sector and you think back to some of the information that Ian and Margaret shared, I mean, a huge number of employees in that sector. So, but if you look at retail, it even breaks down within that sector a little differently. there are certain businesses that have done well. Grocery, technology, home improvement have all done well. Obviously, travel, hospitality, and if you look at energy, those are areas that we would be concerned about. But we're also, looking down the supply chain in some cases. So again, if you think about, restaurants being closed or operating at 50% capacity, that has an impact on farmers and suppliers to the restaurants, and it could have an impact on the transportation sector, which could have an impact on automotive, and so it carries through. So we're really trying to assess what that's going to look like, longer term and through the supply chain. What we're seeing and what we would encourage are businesses to have an intense focus on the importance of liquidity and expense control. So, don't take anything for granted. Assume the worst in some cases in terms of watching your cash balances and controlling your expenses. On a more general theme, businesses don't like uncertainty, and there's just an awful lot of uncertainty in this economy right now as we open up. Our economists would say that we won't get back to pre-COVID levels until at least early 2022. And then if you look at comments from the new Governor of the Bank of Canada yesterday, he talked about a prolonged but bumpy recovery, and we would agree with that. Consumer spending, you saw some information on that. Obviously, people will be thinking about, when they go back to businesses, their own health, impact on disposable income, impact on investment portfolios. But the other thing that I think we need to be thinking about are expiring deferrals on loans. So whether it's mortgages or car loans or unsecured, all of the banks have provided thousands of customers across Canada with some deferral relief. The mortgage deferrals, which are the biggest ones in terms of the payment impact, a lot of those will start expiring in the fall. And so it'll be interesting to see what the impact is on spending and discretionary income at that point in time. We're also suggesting to businesses, and we're hearing from them, that, God forbid, but you might have to plan for a second wave. And what does that actually look like? And then in terms of government programs, they have been very well received. There are a couple more than others. The Business Credit Availability Program has been a little slower in the take-up, but CEBA has been huge. So thousands of businesses taking advantage of the $40,000 loan to give them the liquidity they need to get through this. And then I think, finally, we all need to be thinking about the longer term impacts of this. I think the governments have done what they needed to do to get us through this, but we can't be naive and not expect there to be some long-term consequences on things like taxation rates, and what's that going to mean in terms of disposable income and consumer confidence down the road.
Thank you. Yes, lots of information in a short period of time, Greg. Thank you for that. Yeah, definitely concerned about mortgage deferrals and such when they come up, because that's money that still has to be paid by the end users at some point, and there will be an ongoing strain.
Yeah, Corey, I don't think I'll just quickly, I don't think I did say anything specifically about Halifax. What I would say about Halifax is that, we're cautiously optimistic. The optimistic piece will come from the fact that the economy was so strong heading into the pandemic, right, which is great. On the cautious side, again, worried about, people returning downtown back to work. And then I think, having no students or having fewer students come back to the city in the fall is going to have some impact. And then, no large events. Obviously, we have some skin in the game at Scotiabank Centre. We would love to see that reopen at some point in time, but those will be some of the things that probably trail the rest of the economy.
Absolutely. So Dale, just staying on the theme of government support programs, maybe you could weigh in a little bit for your clients, what they've been using, and also maybe comment on CIRCA, which has been a little bit more not as highly touted as some of the other programs, at least here in Nova Scotia.
Sure. On the residential side, it's hard to get a full number of how many of our residential tenants would have tapped in to the CERB program or some others. But what we do know is on the residential side, rent collection has been very strong for Killam, but for other national players across the country, 98% plus collections, we're at 99%. So very, very strong. Commercial is more challenging for sure. So we have a portfolio of about 740,000 square feet of commercial, including about 200,000 here in Halifax. And we are working closely with those commercial tenants. And as we've talked about today, those commercial tenants that have been forced to close for months are really having a challenging time. So the CECRA program is the Canadian Emergency, it's the Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And so I was interested to see a few articles in the paper a few weeks ago when they launched this to say, oh, only if, very small number of people have applied, and the government's encouraging all commercial landlords to participate. What the article doesn't highlight is how much work and paperwork is required to be able to apply for these. So most of the large landlords, including us, are working with tenants on SECRA, but there is a lot of back and forth. And a big challenge is that tenants have to show that they have seen a 70% reduction in revenues from the period from April to June. And the real challenge with that is people started, mid-March, everything shut down. People started figuring out how to make this work. Some started to open partially in May, and around here, certainly in June. So that 70% number, when you're looking at I think there needs to be more flexibility, because there's some that just aren't going to fall within that 70% reduction. But they were probably 100% down, down to nothing in April and half of March, and trying to figure it out. So we're working with our commercial tenants on a case-by-case basis, but the reality is when we look at the details of what's required for that program, some just don't meet it because of that 70%. And I think that I hope the government looks at that timing in a little bit more flexible way. We've seen them make some changes to a lot of the programs as the reality surfaces of what's involved. So I think that that is a challenge. But for those that don't qualify, I mean, we're working with tenants on a case-by-case basis. I think we want to see our tenants get through this and thrive once things get going again. But I think that there's some work to be done on some of those commercial programs.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us are hoping there'll be some revisiting on some of the programs. Okay, a couple. We have a few more minutes left here. COVID has changed how business operate. I know at Lindsay's, our management team has been told to take a look at everything. It's a full reset. What we did before isn't good enough for how we're going to do it now on a go forward. We've heightened our focus on how to evolve our organization and make sure that, we come out of this stronger than we ever had. To use a Wendy Luther phrase, we're looking for the silver lining buckets, how to make ourselves better. So quickly, if you could both maybe, what have you changed? Is the one thing perhaps that COVID changed that you could share with other folks that you think will make you stronger, and maybe a tip for someone else? I'll start with you, Craig.
Okay. I think we've proven to ourselves that we can be more agile and nimble than we ever thought. We've pivoted an organization of this size, both in terms of the way we work with our branches, but our focus with our customers 180 degrees. And that's not easy to do in a company that has 100,000 employees, but I think we've proven that we can do that. I think we've proven that we're resilient at many levels, but in some cases, maybe not as resilient as we needed to be. And so we'll look at that and, in terms of what we might be able to do in terms of training. We've seen a huge acceleration in digital adoption, both by customers and by our banking teams. And so, customers don't have to come into branches. There's a lot we're able to do for them from a distance or through a mobile app. So we've seen a huge take up on that, but we're also seeing people able to work from home. So, if there's another event that prevents us from being in branches, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be a pandemic, it could be a weather event, we're still going to be able to provide services and advice to our customers. And then finally, what I would say is, and this is, maybe something we should have been thinking more about, but, I think we've really come to understand the importance of open and frequent communication. We have really gone to a much greater extent in terms of communicating with both customers and staff. And so lots of conference calls, open conference calls hosted by senior executive, taking questions from the field, and just being completely transparent. And at a time when, we don't have all the answers, saying we don't have all the answers, but we need to hear from people in terms of what are the concerns and how should we respond. And so as a result of that, we survey our teams, and employee satisfaction has never been higher, and customer satisfaction has never been higher. So I think, those are things that we need to maintain when we go back to whatever, the new normal looks like.
Thank you. Dale, I'll pose the same to you.
Okay, I'd say for us, similar to what Craig's saying, it is the adaptation of technology, and we have been investing a lot in our platforms over the last few years. But I'd say going for the remote showings and the online leasing, I think for a long time we have been moving in that direction, and we were actually well in a good spot to be able to move this forward quickly in mid-March. But it is not only the change that's happened because of COVID to be able to make sure people can rent an apartment, see an apartment, sign the lease, do everything right from their phones. But when we look in the future, the next generation of renters, the teenagers today, the young adults who are used to doing everything, they don't need to see and touch everything. So I think that we had planned to implement a lot of these things already in 2020, but it certainly sped it up. So that will certainly continue.
Yes, I see technology, I think, for everyone is being utilized, which is great for a city as innovative as Halifax, with lots of new technology coming out of our young, smart entrepreneurs. Well, thank you both. The only thing we didn't get to was we did want to talk a little bit about not-for-profits, but I'll just touch on that with everyone listening here. You know, the not-for-profit sector is really taking a beating right now, right up there with, you know, tourism and hospitality and others. And it's a tough time. So, you know, reach out to your favorite charity, you know, touch base with them, see what maybe you can do for them. I know Dale and Craig are both involved with United Way and Hope Blooms for Craig and NSCC Foundation. You know, there's all kinds of local community supports that you should be reaching out to and helping. So I'll put that as the last plug, and then let's move it along to back to you, Wendy, to talk about the go forward stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Corey, Craig, and Dale. Thank you for sharing your insights with us, and thank you for your leadership in our communities, both through your work lives as well as for your extensive volunteerism. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Angel, President and CEO of Develop Nova Scotia, and Ross Jefferson, President and CEO of Discover Halifax. These are two incredibly strong partners of the Halifax Partnership and leaders in our community. We're working closely with them on Halifax's economic recovery, and they're going to be sharing with us some of the exciting events and opportunities designed to help us all get back out and rediscover the Halifax that we love so much. So Jennifer will kick us off. Take it away, Jen.
I think I'm going to kick it over to Ross.
Actually, yes. Thanks. We did a little switch up last night, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy, for putting on this great forum. Really great to hear the previous speakers and panelists as well. I know there's a tremendous amount of work going on. And good morning to everyone as well. Really delighted to join to talk about opening Halifax again. And specifically around tourism. We know that tourism in our region represents a significant part of our economy. Here in Halifax, visitors spend about $1.3 billion every year. It is an export in the true sense as defined. It supports over 4,000 businesses and about 34,000 jobs here in HRM alone. If you think of it just in terms of the composition of our community, 1 in 27 people, or about 4% of our population, is actually an overnight visitor, somebody that's staying here in the region. So the pandemic has obviously been a significant hit to this industry, virtually grinding it to a stop over the past 3 months. But we are very encouraged, obviously, by the epidemiology and what's happening right now with COVID, and the opportunity for us to open up safely, very much looking at community first approach as we consider opening the tourism industry. Our primary focus at Discover Halifax has been to gain access to safe markets to recapture as much as the $1.4 billion that's been lost in consumer spending. We have a 4-part plan that we've put in place to help achieve this. Starting with our first priority, we really needed to ensure that we had access to safe markets. We submitted a plan to government on how we believed we could open safely, starting obviously on vacationing for Nova Scotians, followed by Atlantic Canada, and then as appropriate additional safe markets beyond. Today, we are starting to see Nova Scotia at the very early stages of considering travel, and we know we're on our way towards the Atlantic Canada bubble. Second, we know there are some real demand challenges. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty right now about travel. We have people have questions and concerns about safety. They're uncertain if travel is permitted, and if so, they don't know what's open or what the experience will be like. So this has led us to develop a brand new campaign, which I'm going to share some details with you right now, to help reinstill confidence in our destination, demonstrate that we in fact are open, we are safe, and that it's an experience worth visiting. Just quickly, the other two parts of our plans, group sales. We know we had 104 major events and conferences this year that were impacted. Working with our partners, HCC and conference hotels, we've been rebooking a majority of those for future years, which is good news. And we're starting to host some local meetings right now and looking to expand that. And then finally, as part of the plan, the fourth part of the plan, working with our partners, the city, HCC, and Develop, to ensure that we've got strong programming, good animation in our communities and streets, given the large number of cancellations and the changing experience that we have. So I am really delighted to share with you today a little taste of our new marketing campaign. It's literally still in production, so what you're seeing right now is not the final creative, but closely resembles the intent. When we started this, we were looking at our past footage, our B-roll, and trying to put a campaign together. And we really didn't feel like it spoke to the challenges we have today of reinstilling confidence, letting people know what it really looks like and really feels like. So we've completely gone back to scratch and developing a brand new campaign. It needs to really show what it looks like today. We wanted to instill hope and a sense of pride in our community, showcase the resilience, the spirit, and how our community is really playing out now. Because frankly, that footage from before really didn't look like today. And I think we do. We have an economy in a region that is coming back and worth visiting. The campaign includes a new video, which will be broadcast on TV, pre-roll in Nova Scotia, and soon expanding into the Maritimes. We were hoping to show this to you today, but unfortunately just not possible due to the tight timelines. We were actually shooting some of the footage this past weekend. The campaign was and is 100% locally made, including the music and photography. When it launches, you may even recognize the voice over by our local musician, Adam Baldwin. And the goal of this campaign was to create an ad that locals could feel proud of, inspiring them to be tourists in their own hometown, and of course, also invite visitors to rediscover all of the region has to offer. The campaign will kick off across the province on Thursday. In addition to the network broadcasts, the campaign is being supported by print and digital media. As we hope you'll see, it is optimistic, colorful, vibrant like our destination, and encourages people to dine in our restaurants, to shop in our stores, to book a staycation or vacation, and just enjoy the simple things that they've missed. We've also created a new Heart, Soul Halifax guide. Obviously the campaign name is Heart, Soul Halifax. We know that many people's vacation plans have been put on hold and people have been uncertain about what to do for opening. For those who are looking for a day trip, a staycation, or a vacation idea, we've created a number of specific itineraries and ideas for consideration. We're showcasing Halifax's hidden gems and provide unconventional ideas for exploring. These itineraries will provide a compelling reason why Maritimers should vacation in the Halifax region, as we anticipate this market to be opening soon as well. Our goal is to provide locals and visitors with the information they need to feel confident and comfortable getting back to explore this summer and beyond. And finally, we also want to share with everyone and introduce a new complementary campaign that we're working on with the Halifax Chamber of Commerce and the Halifax Partnership. Working together, we hope to start a movement that encourages people to support local and to buy Halifax. The campaign has been designed so that it can be adopted by other communities throughout Nova Scotia, for example, by Dartmouth, by the South Shore, or anywhere in between. You can visit buyhalifax.ca to learn more on how you or your community can be part of this movement. Before I turn it over to Jen, I do want to recognize my team, Erica Pellerin, all of our members, and the incredible effort put together This campaign that you're about to see in a very short order, a very short period of time, right from financing, has had to been put together in the last 4 weeks. So just wanted to express my gratitude for the long time, the long hours and support from those involved. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jen Angel, to talk about her activity. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you very much, Ross. Thanks, Wendy and Mayor Mike and all the other panelists for your thoughtful contributions today. I'm delighted to join you, and I'm really just here to invite you to join us in celebrating the reopening of the city. About 9 years ago, Open City, an event called Open City, was created by a collective of locally owned businesses known as I Love Local Halifax. That event has been kind of the unofficial kickoff to the summer season for Halifax's local shops and restaurants, a call to action to get the community out of hibernation and out to the city. Gord Stevens, my colleague, is a well-known local entrepreneur, and he's a champion of small business. And he's been a major force behind the I Love Local Halifax movement, as well as Open City. And we're really lucky now that he's come to work with us at Develop Nova Scotia. And so this year, we've taken on that program in partnership with the business improvement districts, the Downtown Halifax Business Commission, the Downtown Dartmouth Business Commission, the North End Business Association, Spring Garden Road and Area Business Association, the Quinpool Road Business Association, Halifax Seaport, Halifax Partnership, Discover Halifax, Tourism Nova Scotia, many others. It's a chorus, but it can't be overstated. It's never been more important to support local, and that's not just through Reopen City, but every single day. It's a simple idea, but it works. So you open the season, you invite businesses to individually participate in providing unique experiences. They're often takeout or market style activations that you can enjoy in the public realm. And then you put it all together and it's an event. And it's the same principle we're asking you to consider. Individually, your participation and ability to have impact may seem small, but it matters. And collectively, it's big. We can reinvigorate our downtown, and we can save businesses, and we can help them thrive. Tourism will come back, but it will be slow. There's a gradual return to office, but it will look different. And while a bubble is on its way, there's no need to wait. We don't need to wait a moment before beginning to change the outcome for many businesses, which is the outcome for the quality of our streets, the vibrancy of our downtown, and the magnetism of our city and strength of community. So we really do need to be the tourists we wish to see. So beginning this weekend for the next 4, please get out, wrap your arms around the businesses we love, not really figuratively. We can keep distanced and still enjoy everything there is to love about Halifax. And then make sure you tell everybody about it. We hope to see you there. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Jen and Ross, for sharing that. Can't wait to see everybody out this weekend. And now I'm going to pass the floor to the Chair of the Board of Directors of Halifax Partnership, Mr. Ron Lesperance, to provide some concluding remarks. Ron.
Thanks so much, Wendy, and thank you, Jennifer and Ross, for sharing the events and those imaginative campaigns that offer all of us some great choices on how we can really safely reconnect with Halifax, with our businesses and each other as our city more fully reopens. My name is Ron Lesperance. I'm chair of the Halifax Partnership Board of Directors. And I know I speak for all of our directors in saying how proud we are of the partnership team and the leadership that Wendy is providing for really responding to what is an unprecedented event for everybody. And we've heard some great insights today from all of our panelists and presenters on some of the challenges, but also importantly, some of the opportunities that will outlive this pandemic. we're particularly proud to have joined hands with HRM to develop Halifax's COVID-19 economic response and recovery plan. As we always do, we're working with our investors, our partnership investors, our private sector, our post-secondary institutions, and businesses like yours across the city to implement that plan. And as Wendy said, our goal is to get back to that very rosy picture that Ian helpfully presented on 2019, and to move that forward into the next period, to build a stronger, more resilient Halifax as we have come to know our city to be. As always, the partnership is closely monitoring the economic measures that show our city's progress. Ian gave us a great insight today, but also some very sobering numbers in terms of the impact that the pandemic has had on our economy. And we're going to continue to track those numbers, to track our progress, and to share those insights and opportunities with you as we drive toward economic recovery. I don't need to remind everybody that the pandemic is still with us. So, following the health guidelines, making sure, as we've heard from so many today, Craig and Dale and Corey, on making safe reopening and operational planning an important part of our return to business. So that's how we'll continue to take care of ourselves and each other as we get back to business and to once again enjoying everything Halifax has to offer. Finally, as Wendy mentioned this morning in her opening comments, on September 23rd, as part of our annual general meeting, the partnership will be hosting Reimagining Halifax, the next session in this series. And Corey mentioned Wendy's silver linings from COVID-19, the pivots and innovations that have been uncovered, and some of the improvements we've made. And we're going to focus on those in the Reimagine Halifax event. So we're hoping that you'll join us at that time. And I want to say thank you to all our panelists and everybody who has joined, Your Worship, the Mayor, for being with us today. And I hope, like me, all of you will heed Jennifer's call and get out and take advantage of the coming weeks to reopen and re-explore Halifax. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you everyone for sharing your morning, and for our panelists for sharing their insights with us. That concludes our program today. We'll be following up very shortly with answers to your questions. Thank you for participants for your active participation and questions in the chat. And you'll be hearing from us in the next couple of days. And I invite you to take a look at all the resources that have been added to the chat here. So with that, stay safe, stay healthy and well. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you out this weekend at Reopen Halifax. Thank you all. Have a great day.